For much of the past 2 years, ever since we could return to traveling the world, I have encountered, either in real life or on the internet, a myriad of women who brag and boast about their travels and the number of countries they've visited. What they don't realize is that traveling for females is not the flex that they think it is. It does not make them more appealing to men, or at least not to men worth having, because there are some questions that we ask that cannot be easily answered if they are too well traveled and too well experienced. Because really, that's what travel does: is it increases your experience level, and then increases then the demand for new experiences to one up the previous ones. So here are the three questions. I have to wonder, if I see you traveling, who paid for that? I have to wonder, what is there left that interests you? And then I have to wonder, why are you doing this? Now, the reasons may vary, and there are probably some good answers to these questions, but let's go into them individually and discuss why, without further information, the fact that you are well traveled is no flex. Number one, who paid for it? In the fall of 2019, I had a student who bragged to me one night that her boyfriend took her to Hawaii every year for Christmas. Well, it's no secret that her boyfriend was paying for this vacation. Her boyfriend took her there, paid for their travel, paid for their accommodations, paid for her entertainment. And I know this because she's a student. She had no money. She was on loans. She told me this. And so there's no way that she was paying for this. So he did. And you see the pictures all the time. People taking or with photos of them in exotic places, which are clearly not taken by themselves, because we all know what the selfie looks like. And that there's a certain type of picture that you can tell that was taken by you, and a certain type of picture that was taken by someone else. So it begs the question, did you get some local to take it for you or not? I've traveled enough to know that locals are very unlikely to take your photo. I've had to persuade people or offer myself to take their photo and then have them reciprocate. When I spent 3 weeks in Spain last December, there was only one time where someone offered to take my picture. That was at the cathedral in Barcelona, when I took a photo of this nice American family, and he asked me if I would like one taken of me. But at no other point in my trip, and that was my next to last day, at no other point in my trip did anyone offer to take my photo. So the pictures tell me that someone went with you. Now, that might be your parents. My sister travels with my parents all the time. I have cousins who travel with their family, with their parents or their siblings. But someone went with them. And if it's a single woman who has photos clearly taken by someone else, it makes me wonder, who did you go with? And why does this matter? Because typically this means that that was the person they were currently sleeping with. It also tells me that you have a high demand for new adventures. Because if you've already been to Bora Bora, Marrakesh, to the Maldives, then where do you want to go now? If you've already seen Vienna, Prague, Krakow, Stockholm, Reykjavik, and London, then where am I going to need to take you next? A lot of the places that people go to are very expensive. Resorts are exceptionally expensive, and I've told people that I have traveled to some of these places, including airfare, for less than $2,000, and they're shocked. And it's because I don't stay at five-star resorts. I am not there to see a hotel. We have those here. We have nice hotels here in Vegas. If I want to see a hotel, I'll go downtown. I'm not going to fly all the way to Barcelona and see a fancy hotel. Plus, when I go to a place, I go to see the place. So I went to Spain. In Spain, I saw Madrid, Toledo, Pamplona, Zaragoza, Taracoa, and Barcelona. I saw lots of places. I didn't just see the major places. And I went there when it was the off season, so I wanted to see the places for themselves, the food for themselves. I was not there to see tourists. I was not there to see crowds. And I did not stay in fancy places. And because I was there in the off season, I didn't have to pay very much either, which is another thing. I don't exist to finance your adventures. I have taken women who I was dating to see things, to Washington, D.C., to Cathedral Gorge. Now, some of these places aren't very expensive because we're not, that serious. But I've paid for it and received nothing in return except for them gracing me with their presence. In fact, the last girl I took somewhere, which is a long time ago now, I took her to Cathedral Gorge. She posted photos to her Instagram of herself, no photos of us together. I think that's because she was planning to check out and she didn't want other men she would date in the future to know that I had been with her. So who paid for it? I'm going to pay for it, up front and after the fact. Number two, it begs the question of what is there then that I can introduce you to? If you've already traveled the world, where are we going to go? If you've already traveled the country, where are we going to go cheaply? If you've already seen everything, what is there to see? And if you have already seen all the things you wanted to see, why would you want to go see other things with me? I have, and some people, particularly women, don't want to go back to a place they've already been. Now, I know people who go to Belize like all the time, every year. I have a coworker who always goes to Maine. He's from Maine, where they go to the same place all the time. Like I said, I had a student who always goes to Hawaii, and that's cool if that's your thing. I would go back to places that I've been to share them with someone special because I had a good time and I would like to be able to share it with them, even though we'll have a different time, because then I'm sharing it with somebody that I'm talking to or hope to talk to for the rest of my life. And if you've been to all these amazing places, in order to continue to keep your interest in many cases, I have to take you to even more interesting and more expensive and more exotic places, which means then I have to do more for the same thing because travel is like everything else. The more exposure you get, the more it requires in order to elicit the same response. There's probably some sort of chemical dependency there, the excitement factor, the hormones, the chemicals that fire off in your brain. And in order to have a good experience, you've got to have a better one every single time you go. Men also like to be the one who teaches their partners. Men do not like to have women show them things. Men like to be the teachers, the sharers, the one who introduces you. And if you've already been everywhere, what am I supposed to introduce you to? Third, why are you going? A lot of them are really proud of the places that they've been. They brag about all the stamps in their passport without understanding that I can see a lot of places without getting stamps in my passport. When I went to Belize in 2019, I saw Belize, Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico. I have one stamp. Because where do they stamp your passport? At the airport. There are no stamps at the passport on the borders of many countries. And if you go to Europe, they only stamp your passport if you go to the airport. When I went to Iberia in 2022, they were pissed at me in Spain because they couldn't figure out how I got into Spain. I flew to Lisbon. I crossed the border on a bus. When you cross the border in the EU, they don't stamp your passport going from country to country. So unless you go to the airports, you're not going to fill your passport with stamps when they don't stamp you in America anyway. And there's places they won't stamp you at all. Like my family just went on a cruise, not me, but my parents and my sister, and they didn't stamp their passports. They just looked at them. And they looked at them not to go to those countries, but to get back on the cruise ship. You think the cruise ship was stamping them? No. The cruise ship is not a country. The cruise ship is transportation. The cruise ship doesn't stamp your passport. So I know they went. They know they went. There's no proof in your passport. Filling your passport with stamps is a pride thing. And pride gets no satisfaction out of having a thing, only out of having more of it than the next man. So I've lived overseas in other countries for years. As a consequence, yeah, I've been to the capital cities because that's where the airports are, but I've also been out in the middle of nowhere. I've been to ruins in the middle of the Belizean jungle. I've been to festivals in the Austrian hinterground. I've been to church pageants in the UK. I've been to tourist spots, but I've also been where the people live. I've sat around and heard them talk about how they hate foreigners while I'm sitting in their midst as a foreigner. It's funny, it's hilarious. You learn about them, you learn about their history. You ask them, okay, tell me about the story of this statue in the main plaza where instead of a flag, he's got a boot on the top of a pole. True story. I visited tons of nations. I saw a lot of interesting things, but I don't have stamps in my passport. And I didn't just see the Rassafrassin capital. I have an ex-girlfriend who I recently learned went to Rome, Vienna, Prague, Paris, London, Reykjavik. And so I can see her Instagram without having an Instagram account. And given the fact that it timestamps it, I know what they did is they flew from capital city to capital city, and they weren't there very long. So what did they see? The capital city. Great. That's not the only thing there is, and most European capital cities are pretty much the same. There's a bunch of really cool museums, some really cool historically significant places, eateries, souvenir shops, nice vistas. They're all Roman settlements that are now capitals of foreign nations. Once you've seen one, I know this sounds bad and some of you will disagree, you've seen them all because they don't really look different. Each one has different landmarks. Paris has the damn tower. What does Vienna have? Berlin's got the wall. London's got Parliament, Big Ben, etc. But really, they're just capital cities. They're not even, in many cases, evidence of what they used to be like. If you go to Vienna, you got to cross the damn river and go to Floridsdorf. Go to the Vienna Woods. Go to Schwechat. Go to Mördling and see where they filmed the Three Musketeers movie that came out in 1998. Because those are really interesting places that are not downtown within the old Roman city wall. When I visit, I go and meet the people. I talk to the people. I eat their food. My friend dragged me around Belize to all these stupid tamale places. I'm not really a big tamale fan, but it had the secondary benefit of, since we were often the only customer, we also had their undivided attention for conversation. So we get to meet real people in Belize. Not tourists, not at tourist traps, but at roadside foods and fruit stands. And so I'm glad he did it. The tamales were okay. If you want stamps in your passport, if you want to go see stuff, go do it. But I have to ask the question of why and how are you doing this? Because I'm doing it because I'm curious. I'm doing it because it allows me to go and meet people. And I don't post it on the internet, except for this. I don't brag on Instagram because I don't have an Instagram. And unless you know me, nobody even knows that I went because I only do anything after the fact. I posted some videos about trips and traveling in Spain, some of my experiences in France. I'll post videos and blog articles about my next trip because they'll be based on experiences I had and advice to give to the next person who wants to go to where I went. Because that's the cool thing to do, is pass on what you've learned. I'm a teacher. In order to really to pass on information, you have to understand where it came from. In order to understand where it came from, you need to see and meet the people. And you meet the people where they are. You don't meet Austrians when they come over here. Austrians are pretty standoffish anyway. You meet them in Austria. You meet Germans in Germany. You meet Italians in Italy. You meet Spaniards in Spain. You meet Swedes in Sweden. And you meet Belizeans, Mayans in the nations that occupy the land that once was covered by their empire. You're not going to see them in their native state unless you go to their native land. But a lot of women who travel don't go there for that. They go there to be seen there. And not by the people who live there, but by strangers on the internet and Americans who may never go. So who's paying for this? Why are you going? And then what is there left for me to share with you? Because one of the things I'd really like to do, I had this really cool experience in 2013 when I went to Alaska. My luggage somehow didn't make it on the plane coming out of Vegas, so it came on the next flight. I'm glad there were two. I wouldn't have had any luggage that night. And so I had like 4 hours to burn. And I went down to this glacier park thing that was closed. And because it was closed, I just sat there and watched the glaciers melt. And for a while, time stopped happening, stopped mattering, until some other tourists drove up and made noise, and then they disturbed it. But it was an interesting experience, and I wish I could share with someone. And I know if someone had been there, it would have maybe disturbed it and ruined it. I don't know. But to take them back there to something that was meaningful to me. That's what my dad did for me, and that's what I would like to do for my kids if I ever have them, or someone who's special to me if I ever find her. Because life is richer when you share it with someone who means something to you. If the people on the internet mean something to you, if filling your passport with stamps is meaningful to you, that's great. It's not the flex that you think it is. I've lived overseas. I know the people. I have friends in these places. People who want me to come back. Gilda of Saint-Jacques-sur-la-Mer. Corny O'Connor of I think he lives in Straswalchen by Wallersee. People who are like, the Giles family in the UK, when are you going to come and visit? That can't be stamped in a passport. The people are here and here. And I'm glad of that. Traveling will expand your world. I recommend that you do it. It will expand your understanding and appreciation of people. I learned a lot about Spain by going there, about the Mayans by seeing Belize. I learned a lot about myself by leaving home, and I learned to appreciate home by being away from it for a while. I love my country, I'm grateful to be an American, and I'm grateful to have the freedom and the opportunity to travel abroad and see other places, other things, and say, God, thy works are good. Take the opportunity if you have it, but if you don't, it's not a disadvantage. We're not better than you because we traveled. We're just more traveled. Godspeed, take care.